'Cause I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the deserts bare, man. I've breathed the mountain air, man. Of travel I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere. Been to Tullamore, Seymour,
Port Fairy.
Lismore, Nambour, Roochdore, Kilmore, Marilla,
Port Fairy.
Lemmerville, Wallaville, Connemara, Connemara, Strathrown, Prospine, Alladala,
Port Fairy.
Darwin, Gingin, Lillaquin, Muckilla, Wallamilla, Bougainville, Cumberland,
Port Fairy.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the deserts bare, man.
You know, one of these days, Rob, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to look at a list of all the songs that are mentioned and I'm going to find someone who lives in one of the towns he's been to. But today we're going to, surprisingly, Port Fairy, where we find Leesa ClauscenBrown. Hello, Leesa.
Good morning, gentlemen.
How are you travelling down there in beautiful Port Fairy?
Doing pretty well on this rainy but quite lovely winter morning in Port Fairy.
It's not a bad town you live in.
I agree. Completely agree with you, Rob.
We have been watching the weather, because we do a weather report on this very informative radio show that we do, and we noticed it was raining Colac, so I'm assuming you've copped a bit down there this morning.
Yes, it's pretty good now. We're swept through, but look, that's pretty standard Port Fairy winter. Lots of rain, which is good out there for the farmers as long as it's not too much. But it does make it, just rug up and be cosy inside is sort of my preferred method to get through winter in Port Fairy.
Yes, and so you sort of go inside in late April and come out again in early September. Is that how it works?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that.
There's coastal towns. We've got a lot of them here. Bellarine Peninsula. And the surf coast. They get very vibrant. A lot of younger people surf. Port Fairy strikes me as a place where the more mature person would go to rest during the summer months. That's the feeling I get when I'm in the town. Is that what it's like, or is there a lot of young people there as well, bouncing around in the surf?
That is a brilliant question. I think there's a little bit of both. You definitely have a lot of families come here over summer, so the camping grounds are always full with families who often have been coming here for decades, so they may be camping on the same site their parents camped on, which is really, really quite cool. So we do get lots of young people through in that sense. There is a slightly more mature, I guess, age group that lives here, I think. Obviously, I'm not putting myself in that category, but we did have sort of 35 to 55-year-olds move here during COVID, so like a lot of small towns. So that sort of balanced things out a little bit, but some of them bringing their families with them. But there are a lot of young local kids who definitely get out in the surf, even in this weather. I'll go for a walk later today, and if the surf is half decent, there will be at least half a dozen people out there trying to catch a wave. So it's really lovely to see that vibrancy.
There's a word for that. I think it's ridiculous behaviour, I think is the word I'm looking for. Hey, now, we promise not to talk too much about the work you do because it is a little bit sensitive, but let's say you work in the corporate environment. Are we happy with that?
Yep.
Okay. So you live a long, long way from the cities where typically corporate activity takes place. I'm assuming there would be a few people like you who are able to do their work in a corporate environment but live in a beautiful coastal town like Port Fairy, nearing where you are.
Definitely. I think it's that's one of the great things that did come out of COVID was at least the understanding that people can work from different locations quite successfully. Though I must note, that's not necessarily common. More and more bigger corporations and government are really trying to get people back in because there is something that is lost if you're not actually getting some face time with people. So to work from home full time does take quite a lot of discipline, actually. I work in sort of very people-centric roles, so communications. I'm constantly having FaceTime with people because if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to do my job very well. So, but there is a lot more people that are able to do that and take advantage of I guess, technology, not having to be wedded to a city. So it's pretty great. Because
I would have thought you've got enough infrastructure in your town, and I mean technological infrastructure, i.e. decent internet and so on, but also you've got a nice little shopping centre there. You really don't need to leave Port Fairy to exist. And if you do, 35, 40 k's down the road, you've got as Victoria's third or fourth biggest city.
Yeah, exactly. So when I'm not travelling for work, I don't leave the town at all. I very barely even drive, to be honest. So we've got everything we need. We have a really great small supermarket here which is also great because it stocks local produce, which a lot of people are a big fan of, but also then on Saturdays we have markets where you can pick up extra things like the volcano produce, which is the spray-free produce from just up the road, which is really popular. They're always there. And we've got our local butcher who stocks, local meats as well. So we're very lucky that we've got everything you need. You really don't need to leave the town if you don't want to. And yes, Warrnambool's just a sort of 25-minute drive. Actually, we'll be going there later today purely to get some water because, of course, the tap water in Port Fairy is pretty awful to drink.
Well, there had to be something going against the town. Everything else seems perfect.
That might be make it easier to answer. Next question: Do you take your beautiful place of residence for granted a bit sometimes, Leesa?
I think so. I think everybody here does at one point or another. And it's pretty easy to take something for granted, but I definitely try to get out, even at a lunch break and just get down to the beach and have a walk just so that we're not doing that. We'd moved from Melbourne a few years ago, so I have to keep reminding myself we moved here for a reason and to really just, drink in what this town has to offer. It's important to be able to do that.
Well, Rob's just disappeared momentarily. He's getting ready for the next program, so it'll sound a lot like it's just me now, but that's okay. The level of conversation will improve, no doubt. So in terms of, people coming down there, as you said, for holidays and the like, do we have a sort of some sense of how much bigger the town gets during holiday season? Like, is it twice as big, half as big? Well, it wouldn't be half as big. 3 times as big?
Definitely, yes. So summer, look, we swell just enormously. I think, I can't remember the numbers from last summer, but I do know Port Fairy Folk Festival, we've often got about, sort of 20,000, 30,000 people depending on the year, and it's not been quite right the last few years, obviously, just coming out of COVID, but it does swell enormously. So like a lot of coastal towns, about half of the houses in Port Fairy are short-term accommodation, so they are all booked out. And then, just one caravan park alone last year in a 4-week period, I think they had something like 3,500 check-ins. So that's not even the people, that's just one site. So that gives some idea of the scale of how many people make their summer holidays here in Port Fairy.
And I know I used to spend a bit of time at Phillip Island, which is kind of like a similar sized place on a bit closer to Melbourne, obviously. And the locals used to sort of grit their teeth through those sessions because they knew that the town's businesses couldn't exist without the tourism sector. But when the tourism peaks were on, you just couldn't get into a cafe, you couldn't get into the supermarket, you couldn't find a park in the main street. Is there a bit of that going on?
Yeah, I think a lot of the locals will sort of hibernate a little bit. They'll still get out and about and, do things, but I think you'd be very unlikely to see lots of locals out, doing things like eating out and going to cafes during that period. But this last summer just gone seemed to be a little bit different, which was great. And they do have things on in town, like mid-January we get like the hot rods come through, so that's a really great for tourists and locals alike to kind of get out and just be able to walk around and have a look at the really cool cars, and it's got a really nice family atmosphere as well. So there are things that people will come out and support as well, which is really great. I
guess it's a bit of best of both worlds too. If you've got a house in Port Fairy and you've got family somewhere else, go and visit them during the peak season and rent your house out on Airbnb or something similar. I'm sure that there are definitely people who do that, definitely during the folky weekend too. Yeah, I would have thought they'd pull a fair, and in all seriousness, makes for a very good business idea, albeit it probably makes it a bit tricky for some of the locals who are running businesses like hospitality businesses where people are on more like a minimum wage to actually find sensible accommodation for their staff. Yeah, that's very true too. I think that's a challenge being faced right around Australia, coastal Australia at least. Having that accommodation where people can actually afford to live. So our council's done some really great initiatives, and I think some of the Surf Coast initiatives as well has been really great to try and, at least from a short-term perspective, provide some affordable accommodation to hospitality workers. So hopefully there's a longer-term solution in the pipeline, but until then, I really have to put my hat off to councils trying to tackle this particular challenge in these sorts of towns, because it's not an easy fix. Fair enough. Well, Leesa, we need to head off and let Rob do his Sports Fix program in a minute or two. So thanks for being part of a regional roundup, and we'll certainly say good day next time we're down in Port Fairy. Fabulous. Thank you so much, gentlemen. We'll chat to you soon. Thank you. Leesa ClauscenBrown there from Port Fairy on our regional roundup conversation today.